Nearly a year after the first shots of the American Civil War were fired, the fate of a fractured nation hung in a precarious balance. Both the Union and the Confederacy had entered the conflict wrapped in the romantic illusion of a swift, minimally damaging war. Yet by the dawn of 1862, that illusion had shattered. The Union, despite possessing a staggering laundry list of industrial and demographic advantages, was visibly struggling to find its footing. The Confederacy, conversely, was proving to be a fierce and brilliant adversary on the battlefield. But beneath the surface of spectacular Southern tactical triumphs lay a quiet, systemic erosion. The year 1862 would vividly illustrate a fundamental truth of the conflict. The Confederacy was winning battles, but structurally, economically, and diplomatically, it was losing the war. The structural hollowing of the South began not on the famous battlefields of Virginia, but in the vital waterways and border states of the Western Theater. In January, the Union secured critical morale boosters at Middle Creek and Logan's Crossroads, where the rainy, chaotic conditions proved disastrous for poorly equipped Confederate troops relying on antiquated flintlock muskets. These early clashes weakened the Southern grip on Kentucky, throwing the door wide open for deeper Northern incursions. What followed was a logistical catastrophe for the Confederacy. In February, Union forces pushed the battle to Fort Henry and shortly thereafter to Fort Donelson. The rapid fall of these strongholds meant that the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers were permanently severed from Confederate access. By losing control of these watery highways, the South was stripped of its most critical logistical lifelines, allowing the Union to split Southern territory and restrict the movement of troops and supplies for the remainder of the war. This pattern of structural enclosure expanded along the coasts and into the trans-Mississippi West. The Union Navy methodically choked off the southern coastline, exemplified by the capture of Roanoke Island, which gave Abraham Lincoln a long-craved swell of strategic optimism. Meanwhile, in the rugged terrain of Arkansas and Missouri, the Confederacy attempted to aggressively push back Northern influence. At the Battle of Pea Ridge, a massive Confederate force planned a brilliant rear-guard ambush. Despite initial successes that shattered Northern positions around Elkhorn Tavern, the Union's ability to organize a devastating counterattack the following day ultimately handed them control of Missouri and established a permanent base in Arkansas. What had begun as an ambitious Southern offensive transformed into a crumbling defense, illustrating that even when the Confederates fought with immense courage, they could not sustain their momentum against a better supplied enemy. In the Eastern Theater, the war took on a deceptively favorable appearance for the South, largely due to the cautious nature of Union leadership. General George B. McClellan launched the massive Peninsula Campaign with a staggering force of 100,000 men and hundreds of ships, aiming directly for the Confederate capital of Richmond. McClellan was an exceptionally detailed planner, but his fatal flaw was a profound timidity. He consistently overestimated enemy numbers and acted with crippling caution. When confronted by Confederate lines at Yorktown, McClellan opted for a month-long siege rather than an outright assault. While the eventual Southern evacuation of Yorktown and their subsequent fighting retreat at Williamsburg were painted by McClellan as grand Union victories, they were in reality a deliberate, brilliant stalling tactic by Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston. By trading space for time, the Confederates successfully delayed the Union advance for over a month, buying precious weeks to amass the manpower required to defend Richmond. However, this strategy of defensive stalling came at a horrific human cost that the South simply could not afford. The brutal reality of this attrition was laid bare at the Battle of Shiloh in April. Blindsided by a surprise Confederate assault, Union forces under Ulysses S. Grant were initially driven back in blood-soaked chaos. But as the fighting dragged on to a second day and Northern reinforcements flooded the field, the Confederate offensive buckled. Shiloh became the most deadly battle in American history up to that point, resulting in over 23,000 total casualties. Crucially, the Confederacy lost General Albert Sidney Johnston, who bled to death on the field. While the Union won a costly victory, the deeper story was mathematical. The Union possessed the population to replace its losses, while the blockaded, less populated South was burning through an irreplaceable pool of manpower. The illusion of Confederate dominance reached its peak in the summer and autumn of 1962. Brilliant maneuvers by Stonewall Jackson in the Shenandoah Valley, culminating in a ringing victory at Winchester, sent Union forces retreating in panic. This was soon followed by a crushing Confederate victory at the Second Battle of Bull Run. Emboldened by these dazzling tactical successes, General Robert E. Lee decided to transition from a defensive posture to a full-scale strategic invasion of the North. He aimed to take the war out of ravaged Virginia, harvest Northern crops, and force a peace settlement. Instead, this aggressive gamble brought the Confederacy face-to-face with its geopolitical limits at the Battle of Antietam. Fought in September, Antietam remains the bloodiest single day in American military history. Though tactically a stalemate, Lee's invasion was halted, forcing his battered army to retreat back across the Potomac. The strategic consequences of this failure were catastrophic for the South. At the time, Great Britain and France were on the verge of diplomatically recognizing the Confederacy, a move that could have altered the entire trajectory of the war. By halting Lee's advance, the Union demonstrated it could hold its ground, causing European powers to hesitate. Seizing the political momentum of Antietam, President Lincoln delivered the definitive diplomatic death blow to the Confederacy by announcing his intention to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. By transforming the conflict from a war over political preservation into a moral crusade to eradicate slavery, Lincoln effectively locked Europe out of the conflict. No European power could now diplomatically or militarily align itself with the South without appearing to champion the institution of human bondage. As 1862 drew to a close, the tragic paradox of the Confederate war effort was displayed one final time at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Due to severe logistical delays within the Union War Department, Northern forces launched a poorly organized, tragic assault against entrenched Southern positions on Marye's Heights. The result was a slaughter, a resounding Confederate victory that sent Northern morale plummeting and caused widespread political panic in Washington. Yet just days later, the grueling Battle of Stone's River concluded the year with a fierce Union counterweight, restoring Northern resolve. When the curtain fell on 1862, the grand strategic picture was clear. The Confederacy had proven that its generals were master tacticians and its soldiers were fiercely resilient, winning some of the most famous battles of the century. But tactical victories do not automatically equal strategic success. By failing to secure foreign intervention, losing control of the critical western rivers, being driven from key border states, and facing a transformed moral landscape under the Emancipation Proclamation, the Confederacy was being slowly, inexorably strangled from within. They were winning the battles, but the unstoppable machinery of attrition, logistics, and global diplomacy was ensuring they would lose the war.